Thank you so much,
You're
Nancy.
very welcome. Thank you for coming.
And Kim, thank you so much for coming despite weather and childcare problems. We're very happy to have you here. Kim Kessler was, until just a few weeks ago, the food policy coordinator in the Office of the Mayor of New York City. And she's now the Director of Policy and Special Programs at the Resnick Program for Food Law and Policy at the UCLA School of Law, but still here with us in New York City. Kim is going to talk about some of what she thinks maybe New York City has learned about food policy in the last several years, and whatever recommendations you have for food policy advocates about going forward, about strategies.
Great.
And thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Nick. Yes, as Nick, I sent a couple desperate emails and text messages this morning because my morning babysitter did not show up. So it made for a little excitement in getting here, and it is an exciting morning because I get to talk about New York City food policy, which obviously I can't get enough of and haven't quite been able to give up on yet. And the reason I was so excited to have the chance to do this is because really it's a great opportunity to talk about the incredibly significant and groundbreaking work that New York City has done in terms of advancing municipal food policy strategies, and to reflect on how I hope that this work continues and builds and grows over time. So I think it's safe to say I'm very invested in the success of food advocates and continuing to advance these efforts. And what I thought would be useful to do in terms of time going forward is, you have to know where you've been to figure out where you're going. And so to just go over some of the high points of city food policy strategies in recent years, and then some thoughts about the role of advocates and how you can work with the city to advance your goals. And I think, because particularly want to leave some times for a question and discussion, I'm not going to go through a laundry list. There's a lot that's happened over the last many years, and many of you have been involved in that, so I know that people have a high awareness of it, but just to touch on some of the key strategies and areas. So the issues that we're all concerned about are obesity, hunger, diet-related disease, issues of inequity, and sustainability. And we've really tried to tackle all of those, and it's one of the reasons it's challenging when people say, well, what's the biggest accomplishment, or what's your favorite thing? It's like there really has been a comprehensive focus, and it's not something that I can speak to because it's the work of many, many partners throughout city government and outside city government. It's embedded throughout our city agencies. So when I'm talking about our successes, it's the successes of all of these groups together. One of the major focus areas where the city's been a real leader is in terms of healthy retail access strategies and what we can do to make sure that there's healthy food available in all neighborhoods. So we introduced the green carts legislation, and we created about 500 mobile vending carts that sell produce only in neighborhoods across the city. In the past couple of years, we've tried to deepen that work and increase accessibility by providing those green carts with EBT machines. So up to about 100 green carts now have EBT machines so that they can accept food stamps. Another major strategy area has been farmers markets, and New York City was the first municipality to create a program to incentivize use of federal benefits at farmers markets. It's the Health Bucks program that we're all great fans of. And in 2012, we more than doubled that program and increased it to reach all farmers markets. It was originally targeted to the neighborhoods where we knew we had the greatest issues of disparity. About a couple of years ago, we also worked with city agencies to remove daily permitting fees at farmers markets in low-income neighborhoods, and to create a how-to guide as to how to create farmers markets, because we know it can be difficult to navigate city permitting processes, and we work in very complex bureaucracies. One of the big, stepping back, it really has been a big success area for New York City. We have data going back to 2006 on farmers markets. We had about 70 farmers markets then. Today we have over 140. And what's really exciting about this is that throughout that time and that gain in farmers markets, we did an analysis of farmers markets in high poverty and very high poverty neighborhoods. And more than half of our farmers markets are located in high poverty and very high poverty neighborhoods. And that has stayed consistent as we've increased the number of farmers markets throughout New York City. So it's very exciting, and it's a very meaningful health impact to the people who live in those neighborhoods. In terms of urban agriculture, we've had a lot of interest in this area. The city had long-term, well-established programs around community gardens. In recent years, we undertook a very significant, exhaustive inventory of municipal land to try and identify land that was potentially suitable for urban agriculture. We updated our processes around that and made that information available on the city website and updated the Green Thumb application process so that that information is more readily accessible to people who do want to create community gardens. And we significantly expanded and invested in the Green Thumb program. I was glad to hear, I didn't get to hear all of what Nancy said, which I really wish that I had, but to hear your passion for healthy food purchasing, because it's certainly something that the city absolutely shares. And we were the first city to adopt nutrition standards that apply to all of those 260 million meals and snacks that we do serve. They were very ambitious nutrition standards that at the time, they were adopted in 2008, and they far exceeded federal requirements. Prior to these standards, there are USDA guidelines for USDA programs, so school meals or after-school programs, but there's nothing for our correctional facilities, our homeless shelters, some of our other programs as well. And so those standards have been implemented by city agencies. They've been incorporated into our city contracts. We have procurement staff at all of our city agencies that work with their programs to implement the standards. They call for higher fiber, for 2 fruits and vegetables to be served with lunches and dinners, lower sodium, reduced sugars, and certainly no high-calorie beverages and things like that. So there's something that have actually been replicated by many other localities since that time, and we've continued to build on that by being one of the first localities to develop guidance around local procurement and work with city agencies to start to push for increased local procurement. We've also tried to build on the concept of the healthy food standards is, one, to use what we have in our municipal power and to advance healthy food goals, but also reach the industry by using that massive purchasing power it's led to product reformulations, it's led to a unified voice around asking for these types of products, but also it's about creating healthy food environments in the locations that we are in charge of. So we've tried to build on that by adopting healthy vending policies and healthy commissary policies for our correctional facilities. And I think that there's more opportunity to have that be extended to the private sector, to the nonprofit sector. School food is a place where there has been an incredible amount of progress in terms of making meals healthier and having complementary programs from our school wellness councils to our school garden program. We have a garden to cafe program that brings in demonstration celebrations of harvest, and we've gotten salad bars into over 1,000 of our city schools and are trying to get water jets into all of our city schools. We now have them in about 800 city schools, so water jets are clean availability of tap water. And I feel like I'm getting a little laundry list-ish, so I'm going to just move to one other thing I want to mention in terms of the policy advocacy. There are certain things that we can't do at a city level ourselves. So we have worked very concertedly on federal advocacy around issues that impact the city, from school meals legislation to the USDA creation of a food desert locator map, which they have now renamed as a food access locator map, because we, along with some other cities, did some real clamoring around how problematic their map was, which, by the way, left out all but 3 zip codes in New York City, and it was very similar for Boston and Baltimore and other formerly industrial, highly dense East Coast cities. But Farm Bill is something we really have focused on. We've sent 3 letters to the Agriculture Committee, and we spearheaded an effort to bring cities together to advocate collectively around a healthy urban Farm Bill agenda. And first and foremost in that agenda was SNAP and not cutting SNAP benefits, but we really wanted to emphasize the other things that are important to cities, like the fresh fruit and vegetable snack program in our city schools, like the community food projects grants that some New York City organizations have gotten, farmers market programs that, as I've talked about, are important to New York City, and really talk about a comprehensive approach that's not just for the middle of the country, but really represents why cities are invested in this, and the $3.5 billion a year in SNAP that are coming to New York City, and how critical it is for the populations, the residents that live here. So that's my laundry list. It's only a partial one. I'm going to make a plug later for where you can find out the full laundry list. But I want to turn just to talking about the role of advocates. So in many of the things that I just talked about, advocates have played a critical role. They have been our partners. They have been sometimes our partners in implementation. They have been sources of expertise. They have sometimes been instigators calling for these different changes. They have been project managers. There's a role for all kinds of food active organizations in making all of these changes. And I think going forward, one thing is certainly in government, you're in a constant dialogue with advocates, and it's incredibly important part of serving the communities, which is why people go into government, because they care about trying to make things better. In terms of some things to think about going forward, I think the big question that I would pose is to say, what do you bring to the table? So to emphasize what I mentioned, it's more than just, it has to be more than just, here's an idea, here's a policy, here's a totally aspirational goal that you can reach for, and not just one, but like 1,000. Here's 1,000 things that could be better. It needs to be how you can do it and why. Why this? Because it's competing. Once you're in municipal government, it's competing with a million other priorities and changes that can make our city better. So I would say, arm your internal advocates with the reasons why, and because they're going to have to be competing for resources, not just in terms of money, which we all know is a big challenge, but also in terms of bandwidth and focus. So that's sort of the big question. What do you bring to the table? And like I said, that can be partnerships, it can be project management, it can be expertise, it can be community mobilization and support, and it has been all of those things in the past to achieve many of the things that I talked about. And I'm going to just mention 3 kind of core ideas within that. So the first one is coalitions, and I think that there's been so much exciting progress in terms of coalition building around food, and particularly because topics in food are so diverse. Is that your way of telling me to slow down?
Hydrate.
Yes. They're so diverse, it's so broad, it's so diffuse. And there's certainly power in asking collectively for one thing. I think Plan YC, the incorporation of food into Plan YC, is actually a great example of that. The work on that. I came to the city right before we were able to incorporate food into Plan YC, but there had been a lot of advocacy on it, building up to it for a long time, and it was a fairly collective, one voice that this is really important, needs to be recognized here. So there's a ton of power in that, and so I think that's a key thing to think about, and that people have been thinking about is coalitions. The other thing I mentioned already, expertise. Use your expertise. There are people in this room, I see some of you, who are real experts that I've certainly turned to many times to say, I need help understanding the new Child Nutrition Act reauthorization provisions and what New York City can do to take advantage of them. And we're covering very broad areas with a lot of different considerations. So where you have expertise, share it and use that as a tool to help people in city government. And the last kind of key concept, I think, is teamwork. And I'm putting the emphasis on the work part of teamwork. So that, again, is, what can you do around community mobilization, around project management and implementation, around bringing funding partners to the table. It takes a village to do these things. So I think it's teamwork, expertise, coalitions, and doing all of that to really grow your power and move things forward. I want to mention, I'm going to give one concrete example, which is there's a large 1-acre farm at the Red Hook houses in Red Hook, the NYCHA development there that many people are familiar with. I see lots of nodding heads. So that farm was launched this spring. It was a little bit delayed because of Sandy, and it's at the NYCHA development. It's run by Added Value in partnership with Green City Force, which is a green jobs training component. It has funding from philanthropy, funding from the city. NYCHA is very engaged in the management of that farm. And I was there in October, and it was this incredible site of this 1-acre site and 1-acre farm, and kale literally growing like up to your waist, along with many other varieties of vegetables. And the people who were there were telling me about they were preparing for Saturday. They were going to have a harvest event. These are teenagers from NYCHA Developments who are working there through Green City Force. And they talked about one family that comes down every Saturday morning because they have a kind of all hands. People can harvest, they can take the food, they can give the food into a collection that goes to pantries. And so they talked about this particular family that they look forward to seeing who comes down every Saturday morning and participates in the harvest event. So that's the end of the chain of a lot of work. And so moving back from that, there was a call in Plan YC for the launch of one urban farm at NYCHA Development. There was all of the work that went into getting food into Plan YC. And going forward, the success of that project led the city to work with to let the city, including NYCHA, to think about how else can we optimize land use for these purposes at NYCHA, and through the Obesity Task Force to call for the creation of 5 more sites like that and provide funding to NYCHA to help develop those sites in conjunction with partners. And I left out also the Urban Design Lab at Columbia had done a report on use of land at NYCHA for urban agriculture, going back somewhere after, I think that was issued after Plan YC and in between there. But it just is a nice example of you have the expertise coming from the academic community. You have the coalition call for action that got food into Plan YC. And then you have the teamwork around the actual implementation of that project and the day in, day out management of that site that is reflective of a nonprofit community, advocates, philanthropy, and city government working together. So the very last thing I'm going to say is just that a big piece of this is understanding what's happening in city government. So when you go into to make your case that you're familiar with what's happening already, that will make you a lot more persuasive. And one of the things that we tried to do while I was in the office was increase the amount of information that was readily available in one place around our food initiatives and our cohesive, comprehensive municipal approach to food policy. So we launched a website about the information. We launched social media tools about food policy and our Twitter feed, which I highly suggest, even though I won't be putting any tweets out on it, that people follow, because I think it's been very useful. It's at NYC Food, a Tumblr site. We were, tried to participate in as many types of meetings and forums that we could, and we also had a real open door policy. So anybody who asked for a meeting, we met with them. And we did stakeholder sessions around a number of things. So I really feel like a dialogue is an important, critical thing. And the other thing that we tried to do, City Council had called for the creation of a food metrics report to make information available to advocates in the public around food. So this is the second annual food metrics report. We really built on and expanded on what was required by the local law. And I'm giving a shameless plug. This is a useful document, and it's about facilitating advocates holding the city accountable. So it provides, what's happened to date, what are the programs, what are the numbers around the programs, and that can help, I think, advocates and policymakers, know where we've been so that you can take us where we're going. And I probably talked for way too long, but thank you very much.